Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon to discuss the digitalization of the global supply chain post-COVID. NCBFAA is proud to partner with our friends at Expedock to put on, and Flexport to put on this event, and we are so excited that you have chosen to join us this afternoon. We're going to be discussing, among other things, the emerging developments in international trade, the role of technology in global supply chain industry, and building digital capabilities to future-proof your business. As a reminder, Expedock is giving away a $100 Visa gift card. So please go ahead and, if you haven't completed that survey, do so, and we'll select the winner after the webinar. I am so pleased to have the opportunity today to introduce our three speakers. King Alandy D is a proud member of the NCBFAA and the CEO and co-founder of Expedock, a Silicon Valley-based company automating global supply chain workflows with their artificial intelligence service for customs brokers and forwarders in the United States and around the world. He is a graduate of Stanford University, where he spent his years doing AI research while studying engineering. This deep expertise in AI, combined with his background in logistics from growing up in a family of shippers in the Philippines doing international container trade, has developed his strong passion for innovation dedicated to building the future of the industry. We are also lucky enough to be joined by Bernie Hart of Flexport, where he's the VP of Customs and Trade Business Development. With more than 35 years of experience in the global trade management realm with a focus on customs and compliance, Bernie is an expert in the import, export, technology, and compliance aspects of international trade. As Flexport's Vice President of Trade and Financial Services and Business Development, Bernie excels at identifying client opportunities, defining value propositions, designing best fit solutions, and delivering a defined, repeatable process for execution. During his tenure at JP Morgan Chase & Company, Bernie was the global product company head responsible for international trade related to managed services, consulting, and technology. While at IBM, he has held various senior management positions, including full responsibility for import and export applications. Today, Bernie shares his wealth of expertise by speaking at industry events, educating business leaders about the ever-changing landscape of global trade management and the most critical compliance areas affecting our international organizations. And finally, we're going to get to hear from Jack Chang, who joined JUSDA Supply Chain Management in 2018 after a decade with a leading global 3PL. Jack is the managing director for JUSDA Supply Chain Management, Inc., and in this role, Jack oversees American regions, freight forwarding, contract logistics, and compliance business. Jack is experienced and well-versed in the areas of U.S. import and export supply chain design and compliance. In his career, Jack has worked with and for executive director and managerial leaders for many Fortune 500 companies. Jack has provided various services to hundreds of manufacturers and importers in development of import internal controls and manuals, cost optimization, procurement strategies, and network design. Jack has been at the forefront of the supply chain technology movement and has advised various startups. He has expertise in mapping supply chains, assessing supply chain risk, developing optimization strategies, operations, process redesign, and business change management. Jack is experienced in FMCG, in particular the electronics vertical. He has helped many brands design and launch new products into major markets, US and abroad, and he has lived and ran operations in North America, China, and Southeast Asia. And King, before I turn it over to you, I'd just like to remind everybody that's listening today, one, if you've got questions, chat them into that questions box, and we'll do our very best to get them answered during today's presentation. And two, we will be, as usual, both awarding a CCS credit for this, an MCS credit for this, a CCS credit, and we will also send around the PowerPoint after the webinar concludes. And with that, King, good luck, and I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Well, thanks to Bernie and thanks to Jack for making the time to jump on a call with us today. Definitely a lot of things we can learn from both of you. So welcome everyone to the digitization of supply chains post-COVID. We actually have hundreds of people tuning in to listen to us right now. And yeah, we just want to thank everyone for making the time. This is brought to you by Expedock and also NCBFAA. All right, so just to start the discussion, what's happening right now in the freight forwarding industry? Let's start off by talking about ocean freight.
Yeah, Jack, do you want to take that first? This is Bernie.
Yeah, Bernie, sure, no problem. Hey, good morning, everyone. So ocean freight, it's never seen a market like this. Been doing this for a few dozen years here, and the market is definitely different than where I started when I started doing operations. What I mean by that is that the market is extremely tight, and that supply and demand is being controlled by the carriers through the use of blank sailings over the course of the last few months. But what I think is very different now is the fact that there's three major alliances, and the carriers have really gotten organized in a way that they could control how much of the supply is out there. So as the demand continues to increase, what we've seen is prices continue to climb to sky high rocket prices that have never been around in this industry. Paired with equipment shortages, which is really taking a hold of every importer coming in from the Asia region into North America. So that's what I'm seeing in the ocean industry. What about you, Bernie?
Yeah, I'll approach it more from the import side of the house and the customs piece on this. And I apologize to everybody that joined. My camera is not working, so you're just going to have to listen to my voice here, which is probably just a good thing that you don't have to see me. But as far as the freight forwarding industry in general, as it relates back to customs as well, we're seeing unprecedented volatility across trade lanes this year. There's a lot of peaks and valleys associated with this, as you just heard from Jack, especially on the ocean side. As it relates to customs, the sheer volume of U.S. customs has been difficult for brokers to keep up with during the latter half of this year. We're seeing a lot more volume coming in. That volume that's coming in is more on, I'll call it mid-market and above size companies, not the small and emerging type clients. We've seen a definite drop off in that, but as far as the bigger guys, we're definitely seeing an increase in that. As far as what we're also seeing is a lot of PSC, post-summary correction work this year because of sanctions, because of exclusion lists, things along those lines. There's a lot of post-summary corrections, i.e. Importers of record wanting to go back and recoup some of their money if they paid too much or didn't take advantage of an exclusion. This year, especially with COVID-19, if we look at what's going on from an overall industry perspective, when I think about the supply chain in general, when has it not been in turmoil for the last 10 years? It just seems like there's always something going on in this. But now with COVID-19, it really has put I'll call it an exposure on the need for data, the need for visibility, the need for more automation, more electronic exchange of information, which I know, King, we're going to get into in a couple more questions here. So I'll turn it back over to you to answer that question as well about what we're seeing from the current state.
Absolutely, yeah. It seems like there's a lot going on with ocean freight over here. Specific question for Jack would be, so you mentioned the ocean carrier alliances specifically. Maybe you can talk more about the effect on that on the audience today, aside from carrier capacity, since for context, we have a lot of customs brokers and freight forwarders joining us.
Sure. So on the particular pieces with the alliances, what we're starting to see now as results come in for quarter three and guidance is issued for quarter four for some of the carriers that are publicly traded, all of them, I would say, are going to have better results than what's been anticipated or what guidance they've given. And I think a lot of that is just based off of what's being posted out there. The carriers are making record profits in operating income versus the same period last year. So as we're looking at what the alliances have done, it's definitely gotten the carriers together where in the past, different areas like the TSA, the Transportation Stabilization Act, controlling a different fuel mechanisms have not worked or have been scrutinized. I'm starting to see the alliances definitely have created a way for the carriers to work together Now, how much the FMC intervenes or whether or not the FMC starts investigating this, from the China side, China definitely has stepped in to work with the Chinese carriers to start trying to cut down on the number of blank sailings, to pull back in more of the supply to catch up with the ongoing demand. So how Bernie ties in with the customs piece, I think is relevant, is as volume is increasing or more customers are needing customs services or freight transportation services, how the governments could step in to help regulate or control the market is definitely going to be a big piece as we look forward to 2021.
All right, so I have a question here from the audience. They're wondering, how long do you think the current congestion or high rates will actually last?
Go ahead, Jack, you take that first.
Stop buying things online. King, I think that COVID has changed the consumer shopping behavior, right? As what was Black Friday? I saw the newspapers. The Macy's in New York was pretty empty, but online sales, I haven't seen the latest Cyber Monday sales figures, but I venture to guess they're probably record breaking as well. So I think how long the congestion will last is as long as consumers continue to buy products, buy through different omni-channel chains. I do think that there's going to be ongoing needs for supply chains and freight movement shipments. But let's look at it for why there's such a peak right now, right? Is we have Section 301 tariffs that are expiring towards the end of the year. So we have importers that are importing more product prior to the expiration of Section 301 tariffs on certain lists between list 3. At the same time, we have companies that are trying to get product out before Chinese New Year, which is in February, and they know it's going to be a pretty tight season. There's fear of ongoing COVID, which is also taking up capacity of moving different mass PPE products, gowns, gloves to the North America markets. So I think it's a fact that we have multiple different pieces that all combined together is leading to the ongoing congestion. Will vaccines help? I do think it'll alleviate some of the congestion that comes in, and I think we'll see some of that, some of the volume drop after Chinese New Year. But do the carriers have their act together now, and do the carriers know how to work together to be able to have more blank sailings? Yes. So I do think there's some intervention that's probably needed from the FMC to really provide some meaningful relief to the congestion. And I know there's ongoing conversations to investigate. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I agree with everything, Jack, that you just said on that. I mean, it's going to probably vary by some of the trade lanes that are out there today in terms of where all the volume is today. There's deplenished inventories that businesses are trying to replenish. There's, the Chinese New Year. There's the sanctions that come off, as Jack mentioned, at the end of this year. I mean, if I was to venture a guess, I would say it's going to probably stay congested like this through Q1 of next year. And we're all just going to have to watch this and very, very closely and make sure that, we've got those relationships in place today. I would love it if the FMC stepped in and some other governing bodies to help out with this. But I guess I'll be a little bit pessimistic on that as this continues to unfold in front of us. We've got some administration changes and all of that I think are also going to potentially drive some turmoil with what's out there. I don't see a fast resolution with that stuff either. I think all of this it's going to happen. It's going to change. It's going to get better, but I think it's going to be gradual. I can't see anything that's going to be really swift happening. In the next month or so. That's why I would say through Q1.
Yeah, no, I totally see that, Bernie. Totally agree with you on this. So there's been a lot of talk about China, different trade lanes. So with that overview of the industry, which countries, regions, or trade lanes are we seeing the most growth in right now? And what factors are driving the differences in growth? This is open to either Bernie or Jack. Bernie, you can go for it.
Yeah, I would just say that we're still seeing consistent growth on the TPEB coming in from the Asia side. The European growth is starting as well, but the TPEB is probably I'll call it the fastest growing for us and the area that we continue to have a lot of focus on. We watch globally all of the trends that are going on from an overall business perspective, and we do expect that to continue to pick up. We're looking at the peak season as we go into Chinese New Year and really watching what those volumes are for commitments, for blank sailings and all of that, because as you guys know, it drives a lot of workload and forecasting and planning on our side to make sure that we as freight forwarders, as customs brokers, have the right resources in place to be able to handle these peaks and valleys. And, as both Jack and I and King, you said this as well at the very beginning, we've seen all of these fluctuations throughout this year. It's kind of like, you're looking at it from week to week, what did you actually book? How much is actually committed? What is actually on the water? What actually got rolled? And really, what it's really coming back to is transparency and visibility in the supply chain. That's really what we're seeing as, I'll call it, one of those mega trends as we go into next year, is clients are really looking for importers and exporters visibility to all of their goods from purchase order kind of all the way through. And where are they? Are they on the water? Are they on the plane? Can they expect them? Did it get short shipped? Those are the type questions and really responses that all of our customers are looking for right now from us. And Jack, I don't know if you had more you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I would probably just talk about Section 301 and just the change. As Section 301 came in, I think a lot of importers were hurt, but a lot of the manufacturers started to put together strategies on how to get out of China. So the concept of like a China plus one, where raw materials, components that are used in the manufacturing of a finished good are still being sourced in China, slowly started moving out. So King, back to your original question on where are we seeing growth, is we're seeing growth in Vietnam and Southeast Asia. So in particular, Vietnam, we're seeing growth in Thailand, we're seeing growth in Indonesia, and we're also seeing growth outside of movements from Hong Kong out to different regions like Singapore as financial hubs. I think some of that's because of the U.S. political landscape with China that's led to some of those changes. Other areas of growth are India as well as Mexico with USMCA. So we've seen tremendous movement of capital equipment move out of the Asia region into near shore locations due to the ongoing challenges with Section 301 and just the instability that's created in the supply chain. And I think Bernie makes a good point, is customers are demanding for that visibility of that supply chain. I would probably take it one step further, saying not only are they looking at it from a purchase order point, they're looking at it from visibility from the manufacturer all the way up to how the manufacturer themselves are sourcing product. So from a component level. And I think a lot of that ties in with just the challenges that COVID presented and 301 presented with how quickly an importer product or sales could go down if they do not have a complete control of their supply chain or visibility of their supply chain.
Yeah. And another thing that we're seeing with that is a lot of what if scenarios for sourcing analysis. What if I change my source of supply? Never has it been more apparent now, or a need right now, to do predictive landed costs, because what clients are really looking for is what is the true net landed cost to get this to my back dock here in the United States? What are my duties, taxes, fees, freight, lift, capacity, insurance? They want to understand all of those scenarios. And I know there's a question that was just asked out there about how do you prepare and predict. And one of the ways to do that is these what if scenarios. Do you have the luxury? Do you have the capability to change your sources of supply? And if you do, then Vietnam, India, these are places that we're seeing, large upticks because of the China sanctions and the 301s. And we're not concerned. We're continue to watch this as we go into the new change, if you will, in administration and what that's going to mean overall. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I don't see that as a drastic change. I see that as more of a gradual change. But the organizations and the businesses that have prepared themselves to have the flexibility in their supply chain to be able to change sources of supplies and do those what if scenarios are the most prepared given the turmoil that we're seeing in 2020 and will for at least the first quarter of 2021.
Bernie, so something you mentioned a while ago is mega trends. So perfect seg to our next discussion point. What are some of the mega trends gaining adoption or traction in 2021? I know you've mentioned a bit about data visibility and transparency. Would love to, just go in deeper and see your opinions on all of these trends and others that I didn't mention.
Sure. Yeah. As far as, mega trends, and again, it all comes back to data and visibility. When you think about a supply chain, whether you're a freight forwarder, whether you're an importer, it really is a closed loop process. And you have an importer who's a buyer in the transaction. You have an exporter who's a seller in a transaction. But before you usually the document or the first starting point is the purchase order. And when you're striking that purchase order, you really need to understand in today's mega trend, what is the true net landed cost on this? You have to have access to all of the data and information for those sanctions, for those duties, taxes, and fees, for what your freight is actually going to cost you in today's environment, and do that predictive analysis right up front. Then you want to match that with your actual landed cost, what did it actually cost you, look at the difference between the two, and then gradually shrink that variance over time. So it's going to be the businesses that have the capability to be able to do those what if scenarios and can do that predictive net landed cost that are going to be the ultimate winners on this and have the most flexibility from an overall supply chain perspective. At least that's what I'm seeing on this. And we have seen an unprecedented need for additional data and information. So as I mentioned, usually what kicks this off is a purchase order, but we're seeing this back up even further from a supply chain perspective. Most every company has an NPI process, a new product introduction process, where they know that they're going to sell a product or buy a product, introduce a new product into their supply chain. We want to gather that information as soon as possible as their supply chain partner, as their freight forwarder, as their customs broker. We want that information as soon as possible, because once we have that information, we can minimize the amount of exceptions that happen in their supply chain, really improving their overall cycle time and improving, hopefully, also their cash flow by being able to look at things like duties, taxes, and fees, and really understanding where they have leverage in today's supply chain. And Jack, do you have anything?
It seems like.
Yep. Oh, sorry, Chang.
Oh, no worries at all. Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say there, you discussed a lot about data, and we know there's multiple types of data. There's like unstructured data and structured data, and we actually also have another question from the crowd over here. What initiatives do we have around data visibility and the steps to actually increase that data visibility? So maybe you could share a bit more about that.
Yeah, so one of the things on the data visibility side of this, and I mean, the industry in and of itself, as we talked about earlier, survives on a lot of emails and PDF documents. We need to get that more digitized, but a couple of ways to be able to do that. So first and foremost is we encourage the use of a product library. That is where you share with your supply chain partners. In our case here at Flexport, we basically ingest all of the part numbers as well as all of the compliance information into a product library, and then use that based on getting the product out of the country and then into a country. What that does is minimize the number of exceptions in the overall process, but what it also does is it acts as a source of truth. So when you start ingesting data like a commercial invoice, a packing list, a bill of lading, and you're actually digitizing that into the platform, you check that data against what's in the product library to make sure it's consistent and accurate. What that does is that demonstrates reasonable care, but it also establishes a very, very sound compliance program and identifies any discrepancies right up front, so you can get those worked on so that it doesn't become an exception as your supply chain is actually executing, because you don't want your product to actually show up at the port and then find out it's missing data and information. You should know about that long in advance. And being able to do these visibility functions that we talked about earlier and ingesting this data and information as early as possible into the platform allows for these mega trends that we talked about earlier, King, in terms of where we see the industry going even further, is that technology play, if you will, digitizing as much of this data as possible and then reusing it over and over again to minimize the number of exceptions, decreasing the cycle time and increasing actual cash flow.
Jack, do you want to jump in?
You want me to go back to the original question, trends, or do you want me to continue on the initial?
Let's go off of. I think there were two questions. Sorry, I went real fast over that. So two questions for you: mega trends in general, and also data and unstructured data.
So I think Bernie did a great job talking about the import side and landed costs and getting details regarding the product. I'll probably talk a little bit about what happens once the product gets into the U.S. Being able to have the warehouses, the hubs, the people. Where right now, as we live in COVID, there's outbreaks that are happening throughout the different 3PL logistics hubs, and kind of what's being done and what kind of mega trends are driving that. So two mega trends driving that area I will talk about is probably the investment within 5G IoT. So using sensors to be able to capture information, having 5G within the four walls to be able to have pinpoint accuracy within centimeters or inches of where product is placed, to be able to have faster cycle time counting of product that is once it hits the four doors of a physical warehouse, to get better visibility of how to get product out once it's actually into a particular imported warehouse or hub or distribution center, is some of the mega trends that I'm starting to see, and we at JUSDA is also starting to invest more heavily in. The other one I'll talk about is just the ongoing piece with outsourcing and the needs for all Fortune 500 companies. As a lot of companies have back offices, the ongoing challenges when COVID hit, a lot of those back offices really were shut down for a few days, and it really pinpointed the vulnerability towards the supply chain and the use of outsourcing. So as we look at that, ongoing investments into RPA, investments to see how to get the computers to be smarter to be able to capture the requirements, to bring that to a customer service or account manager to be able to pinpoint those information to feed it back to a customer. So as we look at that, that's probably two of the mega trends that I'll probably capture outside of the multi-sourcing or the dual sourcing strategy we mentioned. Okay. Regarding the question around kind of the piece with unstructured and structured data, I agree with the topics. Is unstructured data is relevant throughout our industry, and it's so much easier to write something handwritten on paper in the warehouses. It's so much easier than keying information in. So as we look at the end-to-end supply chain or the order-to-cash cycles, is the question from one of the audiences of how to start the process is, I think first having a good sense of what your process is from an order-to-cash cycle is the best way to start. Is figure out what your current state is, have that mapped out, look at where it's broken, where is it structured data, where is it unstructured, and starting to tackle those unstructured ones that impact more parts of the organization, not just the customs broker or supply chain, but how does that impact the finance team? How does that impact the sales team, the operations team? And that's probably where the quickest place to start is to find the one that is the biggest problem for all parts of the organization, and that will be the one that gains the quickest traction to be resolved.
Yeah, Jack, you bring up a good point there. There's so many supply chains continue to get more and more complex. Just from an example perspective, I have a client I was working with that has a lead logistics provider that is supposed to do the end-to-end. And we had a problem with the overall shipment. When we went back and tracked it, it actually had changed hands between the sending location and receiving location 34 times in the overall. So you've got all these different personas and touch points in the supply chain. So, and it continues to get more and more complex with triangular shipments and things along those lines. So the more we can look from an industry perspective towards getting it on a common platform, leveraging technology for visibility, and allowing us to then be able to take action based off of milestones is really where the industry needs to go next from an overall technology perspective. So, all the points Jack was just touching on as well. There's so many players in getting a product from point A to point B that oftentimes, we think about the leg that usually takes the longest. If it's an ocean container, it's going to be on the water for a couple of weeks. But there's all these other ancillary players that all need access to data and information. That's why leveraging the technology in a common platform is so key for businesses to be competitive and to stay competitive as the landscape continues to change.
Yeah, no, these are very interesting insights. And so from more of a technology, and I guess given the expertise of both of you in technology, I think the crowd is interested in learning from a technology and innovation perspective, what trends are enabling companies to run? And more concretely, how can they apply and leverage technology to build a more efficient supply chain?
Which one do you want to go first here? Do you want to, Jack? Do you want me? I don't care.
I'll start first on this one, okay. Bernie. So technology trend is, I think it's similar to kind of the mega trends, right? I think Bernie talks about systems being able to talk to each other. So APIs, being able to have multiple systems or platforms being able to connect and talk to each other, I think is one of the trends that we're starting to see and really starting to gain more traction. Where traditionally in the past, if you needed to understand where your container was, your means of doing that was either calling the steamship line or calling the terminal or the port to figure out where the container was to get details around the firm's code or whether or not the container was available. I think there's a lot of different startups, a lot of different companies that have different APIs that are gathering this information that the steamship lines themselves or the carrier community does not have through API methods, more the traditional development or IT softwares that have become an enabler to connect various different platforms together to create kind of that ecosystem. So I'm definitely seeing a trend over the last few years where systems are all starting to talk to each other. People are gathering data from multiple different sources. And I think that allows the visibility, which Bernie mentioned as well, to really start getting a hold of where is my freight, where is my shipment, to really bring that smack dab in the center of everyone. Some of those cases was when COVID started, right? Is with toilet paper, everyone was probably trying to figure out where is the supply chain of the toilet papers, of the essential goods. And as funny as some of those things is, the reality was certain product, they were overstocked in certain hubs, they were understocked and selling through at different locations. So having that visibility is critical. But more than that visibility is having the ability to execute against that, right? Is once you know where your freight is or where your things are, is being able to have the customer service, the teams, the people to execute and make the shipments move in the supply chain. And no amount of digitalization that sits in today is going to match with someone picking up the phone and getting a carrier, getting a trucker to physically move the freight or pulling in favors for that. So I think there's a balance between technology trends and also the need for execution and people that are at the heart of the logistics freight forwarding industry today still. So that's kind of my thoughts around technology trends.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I know we always are going to need those war veterans that are around the world, country by country, that really understand the ins and outs and how everything works at a specific port, at a specific trade lane. But if I look at technology trends as well, there's a lot of businesses that are out there, and I know some questions have come up on this as well. There were importers as well as exporters, and their supply chain partners lack some sophistication for technology. They're not able to set up an API or get electronic information. Even a spreadsheet at times is very difficult to pull. What you should be doing then, or what we're seeing from a trend perspective, is more of a marketplace type of an environment where a lot of supply chain partners can go to a marketplace, a common area, if you will, to be able to see all of this aggregated information. And we are encouraging importers and exporters to look more towards their supply chain partners to help them from a technology perspective. So even though you might only be able to provide a PDF, but what is your supply chain partner doing with that PDF? Are they then taking that from a data perspective? Are they ingesting that into their platform? When they ingest it into their platform, are they capturing all of the data elements, for example, that's on your commercial invoice, or are they just capturing what's needed for a customs entry? Because there could be a significant variance associated with that. And as they bring that data into the platform, what are they doing to help streamline that process? Are they using artificial intelligence? Are they using machine learning? What are they doing to try and help their customers automate and ingest that information into the platform? Because what we're all about here is taking data and turning data into information, and then making that information available to everybody in the supply chain, so that we all have equal footing, but we all have that visibility and we all have access to that data, really at the part number level, as well as the shipment level, as well as the PO level, but you need it down to the part number level. And again, I think that's where we're seeing a lot of these technology trends, and we see the competitive organizations, the brokers, carriers, and freight forwarders that are more embracing that overall marketplace, where they're going to allow a lot more of the transaction sets to flow through them, so companies have and businesses have really more of a one-stop shop on a go-forward landscape perspective. That's what we're kind of seeing across the board.
So we have a lot of questions from the crowd.
I was going to say that.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions from the crowd about the exact same thing. It seems like Jack, Bernie, you've done an amazing job of selling the entire idea of digitization of data, right? But now the crowd is concerned. All right, so now how do we actually go about doing this? Does it require huge capital expenditure? How fast does this data need to be processed, given that shipments are actually live and there might not be the ability to build out that infrastructure? Another question along the same lines from another person is, what pains did you go through in digitizing your supply chain process? So a lot of it centers around actually digitizing that first touch point of data.
Yep. So I'll take this one first, then I'll turn back over to Jack here. So with all of this, it really goes back to understanding the data and the data needs and the process triggers associated with that. So each organization, Jack said this very succinctly earlier, you have your logistics organization, you have your compliance organization, you have your finance organization, you have your marketing organization. They all have different needs for data and information. It's understanding what all of those needs are and how you can best encapsulate that into your overall supply chain, so that it then can be shared with everybody and everybody has access to that information. And I think that is one of the pieces that we continue to encourage clients to take a good look at. What is their internal reporting requirements? So don't just think about it from a supply chain execution, getting it from point A to point B. Once it gets into the country, let's say it comes into the United States, what organizations are then looking for data? What does your finance team need? What does your marketing team need? What does your sales team need? What does your order fulfillment process need? What are those data elements that they need? And then take that and kind of work backwards into your supply chain as to where you can gather that information. We're seeing a lot more companies, especially mid-market and above type companies, that are looking for their supply chains to help them, even from an accounting perspective. What was the ship from, ship to location? What plant code actually provided this? So that they can then take in that information on their side and be able to use it more fluidly without having to manipulate that data significantly on their side. There's so much information that is available. And if you just start mapping that out, and again, you can do it yourself, you can work with supply chain partners to help you map that out. But what we're seeing is more of a strategic partner relationship between the freight forwarder and the customs broker with their clients today to really help them map out that overall process, avoid some of the pitfalls we have all lived through from an overall industry perspective, and trying to make it better going forward. So Jack?
Yeah, I would add on to those personas. I think it's great, great concept, and I highly encourage everyone on the call to really understand your organization, your ERP systems, and what's the capabilities. I think most organizations know the problems that they need to fix. It's just whether or not they have the support of management or leadership within the organization to be able to execute and be able to get executive buy-in. So I think it first starts by being able to state the problems, being able to have that order to cash cycle mapped out, and be able to then put in the personas and the different people within the organization, understand the challenges, the reporting requirements that Bernie mentioned, and then look at the supply chain partners that you work with. Where is that information today? Is it offline? Is it unstructured, or is it structured, meaning it's captured in a way? But I do think it requires work from the community to be able to put these requirements up front, to then expect from the freight forwarder or the customs broker to then be able to ask where they can get the information or how they do structure that information together. So I think that process of how to start the digital supply chain starts with first understanding your processes, and you may not know all of it. There's organizations that range from hundreds of people to tens of thousands of people. The larger the organization, the more siloed it is, the harder it is to get that information. But I do think each one of them have the requirements that has somewhere been documented, or someone's sending reports, right? As finance for the last 2 years, everyone wanted a Section 301, how much additional duties am I paying report, so they could capture it, so that they can manage cash flow better. So these requirements are there. I would encourage that to start the process. It really is to start just writing down the people, who are the people in the finance organization, and I have a conversation by the coffee table, or now over Zoom or Skype or whatever chatting platform, and asking them, well, hey, how does your day work, and how do you get the information, or who gives you this information? And more times than not, you'll find it's unstructured data that someone didn't capture or fat fingered into their ERP system, or didn't get fed into their ERP system correctly, that leads them to have to go after a manual report to correct the wrongs.
Jack, so another question from the crowd over here, right along the lines of what you were just talking about. The crowd says, the trend I see now is that we often already develop a digital front end, but that our back office often delivers manual work. How do you see that?
Yeah, you're halfway there, right? You have the BPO process, but you have the manual work that is just being offshore, and you're really gaining the labor savings. I think that's the big trend with RPA. Having the robotic process automation be able to capture the information. I think Bernie mentioned as well, is being able to get the information in the PDFs, in the documents, being able to have those recognized, captured, and being able to have those information then fed back into the system is really where I see the trend going, and a piece to be more competitive than traditional just back offices. Is we all see the vulnerabilities of the back offices, and I see the next trend is really looking at RPA, investing in the technology pieces with a partner.
Yeah, I echo that as well. You know, working with a partner, being able to get that back office information as digitized as possible. If you can't do it yourself, working with a supply chain partner to help with that overall digitization, so it gets passed back to your ERP or whatever information set you're using, whether it's homegrown. We have the technology; it exists. It's now enabling that, and you know, as Jack really pointed out there, it's process decomposition. You know, what do you actually need? What are your bottlenecks? What is the information? Then work backwards from that. Understand where you're not able to get that data today, and then look for ways that you can get and digitize and automate that data and information, so it flows back to automatically close out your purchase order, by way of example.
So last but definitely not the least of the things I think we all would love to discuss is what we can look forward to. 2020 is closing up and a lot has happened this year. What can we expect for 2021? Feel free to touch on customs, effects of US elections, effect of the pandemic, and all the other current events going on right now.
I guess I would start off with resiliency. Just make sure that your supply chain does not have a single point of failure associated with it, that you've got redundancy built into it, that you're doing the best you can and need to do from a visibility perspective, ingesting the data pretty much across the board. When we look at, I'm not going to talk about the new administration or any of that stuff, but I do think that there's not a quick fix to anything. As we talked about earlier today, these are going to take a while for the new administration to get their arms around and then come out with, policies or how they are going to view it on a go-forward basis. And of course, you have to see how protectionism is then viewed by the other countries as well, how they are going to respond as well. So I think a lot of that is going to remain up in the air. But from a 2021 perspective, again, having that resiliency, the visibility put into it, the track and trace capability, the ability to do the what if scenarios. And then there's two key points that I want to leave you with here as we're kind of closing up or getting to the end of the discussion here, is more along the lines of I encourage businesses to access their ACE information if they're not already doing that today. That's the automated commercial environment. So as an importer of record into the United States, everybody gets, I'll call it a kind of a unique social security number. And actually, the government actually holds 5 years worth of your data there. I strongly encourage you to pull that data and mine that data, take a look at it, see what's actually been filed on your behalf, which you should already know, but it's good to look at trends. It's good to look at, how you have been reporting from a consistency perspective, and also look for, are there ways you can minimize duties, taxes, and fees based on ship from, ship to location. There's 400 different free trade programs out there in the US. There's 14 plus that you can take advantage of. So I encourage that. And then the last piece here is duty drawback. From a duty drawback perspective, there's a lot of businesses that bring in product to the United States and re-export them or destroy them here. There's different types of drawback. But it used to be $3 billion was left unclaimed annually. That number has now gone up because of the trade wars. Now you're looking at probably $4 to $6 billion that's left unclaimed. So the government knows that the businesses have access to this information, importing and exporting side, but either they're lacking the expertise or the knowledge, if you will, to be able to go and recoup that drawback. So for those companies that are out there that aren't exercising drawback or haven't looked into it, I strongly encourage you to look at the drawback landscape. It's going to continue to grow into 2021.
I would Bernie, since you're on that drawback topic, and this is that's the perfect example of unstructured data. You have an importer that's buying on a DDP basis, and the product's being exported by a separate exporter. That's two different parties or two different freight forwarders that you're working with, through probably 2 or 3 different truckers, 2 different customs brokers. That just leads a whole lot of unstructured data or information sitting in different structures. And I think some of those are the challenges as us as customs brokers, as freight forwarder associations, customers are looking for us guidance. Half the time I'm looking at the supply chain and just shaking my head of how disorganized it is. And the need for it is, I think the work for the drawback is easy. It's getting the data to do the drawback that's extremely tedious. I think that's where organizations that can organize structure and actually use RPA in those processes will be the winners as we look at 2021. But as we look forward, some things I would probably say is what we could look forward to is hopefully that vaccine relief gets going in Q1, which could bring some normalcy back to the warehouse operators, the people that are working front lines, to have some relief, to know that they could go home and be safe in the work environment is one. As I think e-commerce is more growth is going to continue to grow. So I think with Section 321, and the de minimis rule, I think there's going to be ongoing growth in e-commerce coming into product or goods coming in from China using 321 into the U.S. region. And the air capacity it's been months since I've been on a flight. So hopefully as passenger capacity comes back into the marketplace, the air freight markets could get some relief, and there's more capacity added back to come somewhat stabilize the air rates that are again at record highs as well.
And on that note, we're gonna wrap up the discussion. Thank you. Thank you. We still have a lot of questions over here, but we unfortunately are running out of time. Hopefully we'll be able to organize another session like this one where we'll be able to have these other questions answered. But everyone don't leave yet, because we still have the announcement of the winner of the raffle draw. I want to thank everyone for coming. Special shout out to NCBFAA, Flexport, and JUSDA for sending in representatives to be able to make this event happen. So while they're pulling up the raffle winner right now, I just want to jump in and give everyone some context on what Expedock does. So we use artificial intelligence, robotic process automation, and human quality assurance to increase capacity without headcount. We allow supply chain businesses to operate more efficiently and focus on what actually matters, customer relationships. And so right now, we are actually already moving thousands of containers internationally every single week. And this is happening without the need to increase operational expense or hire additional staff. It's all made possible through AI and RPA. Also, shout out to Rose Container Line. I think Lance, their VP, is actually attending this webinar right now. He mentioned that we help them expand operations by freeing up time for their operators to handle more business. They're now on track to save $500,000 in operational expense as a result of Expedock's AI service. They said our onboarding process and continuous service is smooth and efficient. Thanks, Lance. We also have a lot of customers here. If you're a customer and you're watching this webinar and your logo's not here, we are currently updating it. We'll have your logo on there very soon too. So now for the final raffle winner, congratulations, Anita Wolslager. I'm not sure if I pronounce your name correctly, but congratulations, you are winning a $100 Visa card. We'll definitely reach out. Everyone, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. If you have any follow-up questions, I can definitely LinkedIn DM Jack and Bernie over here, and can get in touch with you and hopefully help with all of your logistics problems.
Thank you so much, King and Jack and Bernie. It's been such a pleasure to be able to host this webinar with you folks. And I know our audience joins me in saying thank you. We look forward to continuing to engage with you all. And with that, have a wonderful rest of the afternoon. Happy Tuesday and happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Bernie. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you.